Okay, Carly, we are here to talk about Empire of Storms, and I just want to do a quick summary of how we both feel without spoilers, if we can do it. I'll go first. This book is basically somehow about war, except all I remember about it is love, like love stories. And there's not just one, there's multiple, and they come out of left field. And I feel like if we had to sum up Empire of Storms, I'd be like, it is a romance. This is a romance, but it's actually all set during the build up to a huge war. How would you describe it?
I would say it's all romance with a lot of blood and killing and death. I think on the back of the novel, it kind of sums it up. Blood will run, dreams will shatter, an army must rise. And then we, of course, have the Rowan Aelin story where we finally get to scratch an itch, for lack of some better words, in this story. This was epic, this book. I can't wait. I'm so excited to talk about it in this episode.
Welcome to Fated, a podcast brought to you by Magella and Carly, two romantasy-obsessed readers who believe that great books must include declarations of undying love and deep thrusts of desire. Diving into the spicy, smutty fantasy genre, we are here for both the rattling of stars and headboards, and our podcast starts with the worlds of SJM, but delves into other realms. Did we mention that washboard abs and wands of all kinds are welcome in this inclusive and magically charged space? No topic is off limits, and no one is forced to have only one favourite heroine. Welcome to Fated, where we are unabashedly and wholeheartedly hot and heavy for spicy fantasy fiction. It's time to sit down and smut up. Warning, spoilers ahead.
Welcome to the episode. My name's Carly.
And I'm Magella, and today we are talking about Empire of Storms. We are very excited. This series for both of us, the Throne of Glass series by S.J Maas, has been, on TikTok they call it the Roman Empire. The thing you can't stop thinking about long after it's been completed. I'm on my fourth or fifth reread. It is epic, as Carly said earlier. Epic. I'm going to give a really quick summary of what the book is about that really tells you nothing, and then Carly will go in and tell you more. So this is where someone wrote this, and I can't credit it because I don't know where I got it from, but they described the book as this. The long path to the throne has only just begun for Aelin as war looms on the horizon. Loyalties have been broken and bought, friends have been lost and gained, and those who possess magic find themselves increasingly at odds with those who don't. Actually, this might be like some like honest SJM. Maybe it's the official, book synopsis somewhere. Anyway, what that means is that there is war and there's lots of people hooking up. That's what I've taken from this. Carly, how would you summarize the book in slightly more detail?
I think you've done...
But still in a short amount of time because we've only got an hour.
Okay, so I think that you've really covered like the overarching themes of the book. But yes, let's go into the parts of the book that we really, really loved. There's so many, and there's so many converging storylines again. So you've got Aelin trying to reclaim her throne, trying to get back her land and her become queen. And as she's doing that, she is, in this book especially, we see her drawing in these incredible allies and creating her court, all whilst trying to fight numerous threats. And we know Aelin, we know her very well now, well into the series. We know she's also plotting and scheming and planning things behind the scenes that even the reader doesn't understand or know until they surprise us. There's a lot of twists and turns, and oh my gosh, there's so much. So you've got Elide. She's out of Morath and she's trying to find Aelin, but she calls her Selena because she thinks that they're different people, and she's trying to get this stone from Keltane to Aelin, and she's in the woods.
Yeah.
And then Lorcan sees her, and I was doing a reread and I was thinking, it is a bit weird that he sees like a 19-year-old girl walking in the woods and just like stalks her for quite a period of time. What was that?
Limping, because she's got the limp. I feel like maybe we're not going to be able to do a summary because you have literally got to chapter half. So why don't we just segue as we go? We'll try and go in chronological order, but I do think we need to talk about Elide because just from that, I feel like we don't know a lot about her. but already Sarah wrote her in a way that I instantly liked her. Like, she's got backbone, she's got gumption, she's had a really tough upbringing. We know that she's got a disfigured ankle, broken. She's often in pain. She's limping. Her uncle chained her in a tower, and she is still not bitter and she still has hope. And I just instantly am like, if this girl is one of the characters that gets killed off, I am going to be pissed. Like, I like her. I don't know where she's going, but she better have good things in her future. Like, she better have magic, or she better fall in love with a really hot male, because she's already suffered enough,
Yeah.
So I feel like just from meeting her, and I always felt like Lorcan was going to have a redemption arc. Like, they wrote him like he was this brutish, cold, grump. And I feel like as soon as someone feels grumpy to me, I'm like, oh, there's going to be a love interest somewhere. Someone will make him like a love sick, grumpy kind of guy, And I was like, who's it going to be? Who is going to fall in love with Lorcan? So that's what I feel like as soon as Elide came in. She's got such a great side story. She is in Morath. She's got the stone. She has no idea of what she's holding, which is something of immense power. We also know that she's guided by a god. So she has these whispers, and for her whole life, she's been kind of gently pushed towards or away from things, and she listens to that. So when she hears that voice say, don't touch the stone, don't put the stone on you, don't use the stone, she listens to that. And I just feel like it is such a great little analogy for trusting that inner voice in a way. Like, I don't know if anyone else read it like that, but I was like, Elide, she trusts herself. She's got this little voice. She's like, no, not going to access this power. And we kind of get the closing off of Coltane's story too, which I thought was kind of heartbreaking and very sad. And I wrote some stuff down about that. But I'm not sure how we're going to do this actual book, Carly.
We're going to keep going. And if people want to talk even more in depth, come to our book club, because we can talk about this for hours. But let's keep talking about Lorcan and Elide and their story in those early sort of chapters. I really loved the contrast. As you said, Lorcan, grumpy, brutish, dangerous, killer, menace. And Elide looks very helpless. She's got the limp. She's very human, especially earlier in the book. We don't yet know what her magic is, as you say. And you've got this stark contrast. And we do know something's going to happen, because that's fantasy romance. But I have to say that for most of the book, I hated Lorcan. I didn't like him. I didn't want him to have a lead. I was like, no, you're a meanie. You're a big grumpy meanie, and I don't like you. It took me a long time to warm up to him. I don't know if you're the same.
Really? Even though you know that when they're like that, they have had so much hurt, and they are the softest. Like, they will be the ones that love the hardest because they have been so burnt. The fact that he has always been like untouchable, has this wall up, feel like everyone's like, oh, Lorcan. I'm just like, oh my God, he was bullied. He was bullied as a child. Like, he had his heart broken. He was abandoned by his parents. Something bad has happened to this boy. He needs a good woman to love him back to life. That's what I felt with Lorcan. And I feel like I'm a sucker. I'm straight in. Like, there's not many people. Yarrow is one of them who I disliked intensely for a very long time. But not many characters ever, like, I'm looking for their redemption arcs in amongst their grumpy, bitter,
and I could
up
see all that. I could see all of that. I could understand that. I could cognitively, be able to put him in that category. I was like, yes. And I also really didn't like him for a long time. That changed when he washed her clothes, and when he found her what she needed for her period and her cycle.
Period. Oh my God. Everyone, I feel like women the world over, when they were reading that scene, and I was just like, well done, oh my God. Like, if that is not a sign of devotion, and like, it's obviously being written by a woman for women, because what hulking warrior would be ripping up his own shirts to, have use of them for, the period? It just...
Yeah. That was amazing. And they had a common enemy. They had to run together. They had to help each other. They had to pretend they were husband and wife. They had, there was all that sort of forced proximity to get where they wanted to be, to do what they both wanted to do. Lorcan was also had a very different idea of Aelin than Elide did. And so that was a really interesting storyline. Really loved it. And we'll talk a little bit down at the end of the episode about how that evolved and what happened there, because it was pretty heartbreaking towards the end.
He was very protective. And also through through that whole building up of their connection, it showed both of their characters. Like, it showed that even though he was reluctant, he did the right thing. He took care of her. And maybe it was self-serving in the beginning, but then he found himself compelled to protect her. But she also didn't act like a damsel in distress. She would listen for sounds. She would understand the situation. She could read people. She's sleuthy. She's cunning. She can adapt. Like, she can put on many faces. Like, she can go from being this little innocent looking girl to this brash woman to this oracle. Has this chameleon-like ability that she has obviously, if we were in the real world, we would say that she's having a trauma response and she is adapting to the environment around her, presenting her different fronts so that she remains safe. But in this book, we're not thinking in psychological terms. We're just thinking about, like, she's cool. And then she also, like, shows her own courage when they are caught in fights. Like, when, like, there's all these skirmishes along the way to get to where they're going, because Elide has to take the stone that Coltane has given her to Selena and along the way, obviously, they hit lots of people who want to prevent that happening, and they, like, her uncle wants to get Elide back to Morat because he's using her as a bargaining chip with the Duke, and also he's a power hungry, terrible person, and he wants to keep her trapped and powerless. And so just, it's actually a really important storyline which I feel like, though, is the whole book. Like, I feel like we can talk about any of these storylines and we'll be like, but this one with Aelin and Lysandra, that's very important also. And then this one here.
That's why when you tell me to keep it brief, I'm like, there are so many relationships and storylines going on in this book. So I read this as a tandem read with Tower of Dawn, and I'm so glad I did that. And look, all over the internet, you will have different opinions and everyone's going to do it differently. And we're not going to tell you how to read your books. I chose to do it as a tandem read because I just never had that experience before in my life of reading two books, same timeline, different locations. And it was a ride. It was so, so great. And Tower of Dawn actually was one of my favorite books in the whole series, when everyone told me that it was one of the most boring and slow. But I wonder if that was because I did it with Empire of Storm, because it was like Empire of Storm was like action, love, sex, action, and Tower of Dawn was like healing and relationship blossoming and finding out about all these new characters. And I loved doing the tandem read, and I know you didn't do that. I think both are equally valid, but yeah, I highly recommend the tandem read if you want to have that kind of experience.
Yeah, I didn't do the tandem read because I feel like I didn't know it was a thing that could be done, because I read it before sort of arriving on Book Talk. And I also think because of the speed that I read, it didn't really impact, because I felt like I read one and then I was straight into the next world. And so they kind of seamlessly went through anyway. And I really loved that I could get deep into Tower of Dawn with these new characters in this, like, whole new world. The only thing I will say is it did almost feel like, those books that are like an aside, like a novella that's kind of, even though it's not a novella size, but it did feel a little bit like everything's happening here and I am off in this little world, which was a great, beautiful experience. But I was kind of like, oh, they're all different. Like, it felt a little bit weird to not have Aelin, but because I read them both so fast, it was kind of like I was straight back into Kingdom of Ash and we're right back into it. But so I can definitely see the appeal of keeping all the world and characters connected as you're going through so many sort of plot points and character developments. It would be good to, like, know that Kale, Irene are doing this And while Aelin and Lysandra are doing this, and you kind of like, so you can see that the timelines are happening simultaneously.
Yeah, I think it's really clever. And I'll put a link in the show notes to how I did the tandem read, because one very clever individual has actually written up which chapters to read and when to swap books. And so I just followed that. I did markers in my book. That's why they're all over my cover. I've got my little annotation stickers, because when I got to a point where I had to change books, I just took it out and went, cool, that's where I'm up to. But yes, I think that's exactly why a tandem read is very appealing to some people. Keeps you really engaged in all the worlds. So,
because I just feel like this book is so epic that we're going to get a quarter of the way through and be like, oh, that's 4 hours. Could you just tell me off the top of your head, like the pivotal moments for you that you remember or continue to think about?
I've got like the battle in the sea. I've got the sex scene. I've got when Manon and Aelin.
To be fair though,
I've got
that sex scene did not blow me away as much.
Oh my
as others
God!
have.
See, we need to talk about that, because I totally disagree.
I mean, I really enjoyed it, but there was like the Feyre and Rhysand sex scene in the cabin with the paint. I feel like that Cassian and Nesta, when they had like their the headboard, like iconic. You know, I just feel like I liked their sex scene a lot, but I do feel like it felt slightly anticlimactic. Anyway, we'll talk about that. But anyway, the key points that live in my head and your head. Maybe we'll go one for one. So one of the things that I can never stop thinking about is the fight with Lysandra and the sea wyverns, and that whole. I feel like I don't remember breathing. For how many minutes, I'm not sure. But the way that was written, and just all the things that were at play, how they were so smart, and they had kind of booby trapped things and done things, and then the other side came back and was like, oh, surprise, that was sea wyverns, and we're gonna fuck you up. Like, everyone was like, oh my God. And like that moment where everyone mobilized, and like Aelin saw, Dorian saw, like, but Aelin had just had it.
So she'd had a power surge.
So,
and
yes,
that attracted the Veld to Skulls Bay. So this took place in Skulls Bay, and so Aelin's like, well, I need to save it. And so she sailed into the fleet center. Is this the one you're talking about, when Lysandra shifts into the Sea Dragon? Aelin and Rowan join their power on the boat, and she goes so deep into her power that somehow she changes it.
Diana came in, the guard, and took over, because she accidentally, because she was wearing one of the word keys, and it opened the door, and Diana, who's one of her gods, not Maya, the fire god, but the other one, she came in and took over Aelin, and then was like, oh no, I'm going to kill your own army, because why not? Like, it was so cold, and Rowan leapt in front of it, because he's like, that's the only thing, because Aelin will never kill me. She will do anything to prevent that. And while that's happening, there's this epic battle that's happening, and Lysandra's like fighting, and then she's not going to make it. They're so fast. She's trapped between, but she's trying to get in. Everyone's trying to like cut down a gate. Dorian's like trying to use magic. And then Aedian's like the only one who's got one shot to kill this thing. Lysandra's literally, she was like swimming on her dying breath. I was like, dear Lord, is she actually going to die? She could die. She's a side character. Oh my God, I'm not ready for her to die. Like, oh, and it was just written so, and people were like, you will never make this. You have one shot. It's like kilometers away. And he was like, don't talk to me. I can do this. Like, because he loves her. He will save her. And I literally feel like I put the book down afterwards, and I was, I can't breathe. I feel like, how did that happen? How did that happen? Everyone was fighting so hard. Like, no one was willing to sacrifice anyone. We have to save the army. We have to save the people. We have to save the wife. We have to save Lysandra. We have to save, like, Dorian can't die. Aelin can't die. Like, I was just like, oh my God. So that
Yes.
And I also love that Aelin was very sneaky and she knew that the symbol of the Mycelian people or whatever it was the sea wyvern. So she got Lysandra to turn into one to sort of, kind of, I guess, take advantage of their folklore of like when the sea wyverns come back is when power has come back to Skulls Bay or those people have come and risen again. And I was just so smart, because it's perception.
Yeah. Can I read a little bit? Because it's page 337 for those who want to go back and reread. And because that's me, I'm like, where was that scene? I want to just reread that scene. Because again, Sarah's writing is just stunning. And that's why we end this scene like feeling like we've literally fought the battle alongside these characters that are so beloved. So each movement slower as more of her blood leaked into the water. And then she changed course, heading into the bay to the chain and cut north toward him. Aelin examined the massive bolt before him. 300 yards of open water separated her from the range of his arrow. Swim, Aelin roared, even if she couldn't hear him. Swim, Lysandra. Like, I can hear when I was reading and I'm like...
He would be roaring that. He'd be like, swim! Like, he would be screaming it.
Yeah. Silence fell across the entirety of Skulls Bay as that jade sea dragon swam for her life. The bull gained on her, diving down. Lysandra passed under the links of the chain, and the shadow of the bull spread beneath her. So small. She was so small compared to him. One bite was all it would take. Aelin slammed himself back into the chair, gripping the levers and pivoting the machine as she swam and swam for him. One shot. That was all he'd have. One God's... Like, I'm picturing this as an epic movie on a big screen, and everyone in the cinema is like...
Close-ups of his face, there's, like, sweat coming down his brow, his jaw is clenched. Yeah. She is, like, swimming. We've got this epic shot through the water. She's bleeding. Her eye is, like, frantic. There's this huge bull that's literally 10 times the size of her, like a shadow behind her.
Oh, I mean, I'm not going to read anymore, but, oh, my God. Like, I'm overheating just... talking about it now, and then he obviously like saves her and they go back to being banter again. Open your God's damned eyes, Aelin snarled. She snarled back but cracked open an eye. You made it this far, don't die on the rutting beach. You can thank me when your sorry ass is healed, blah, blah, blah. But he ends it with, the useless sentries in the watchtower are now all half in love with you, and one said he wants to marry you.
I said that they didn't stand a chance in hell because I am going to marry you. One day I am going to marry you. I'll be generous and let you pick when, even if it's 10 years from now or 20, but one day you are going to be my wife.
And she couldn't answer back because she was a sea dragon. Like, it's so funny.
Yes.
Great scene. Could do a whole episode just on that scene. And I just, I think I love reading it out because I'm like, it really does take us all back there. If you've read this book, you just go straight back there and like, my God. So that's a great one. I agree. That was one of my top scenes. Can I share one with you?
Yes, please.
So this one had me sobbing.
Oh,
so this was Astron's execution.
After her and Manon had just spent that time together by themselves.
Yes.
So like now Manon knew the whole backstory of what had happened and knew about her grandmother, which shaped the whole thing. Sorry, keep going.
No, I'm glad you're there with me. This is very cool. So this was, like the previous scene in Skulls Bay, this was one that I'm like, I cannot be interrupted while I'm reading this. There'll be no putting this down and coming back. So
screaming at the kids, like, shut up! I'm in the middle. Get your own snacks. Oh my God, can't you just watch some TV? You know,
like. When we talk about this book having a lot of love stories, there is also the love story, the friendship story, the loyalty of the 13, and Manon's protection of them, her, she's the leader. And so she has been taken to trial for allowing witches to be killed, blah, 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 with the fight with Dorian. And she rescued Dorian and she gave him a get out clause, basically. Manon's grandmother is going to execute Astron. And we know, we've seen this storyline over a couple of books now of Manon really wrestling with, I'm a witch, but am I just a killer or am I more than that? And she's discovered what love might feel like.
That's how she was raised.
Absolutely. Yes. So in this, Manon refuses to stand by and let this happen. She's not going to let Astron die on her.
So Manon killed Iskra's second. That's why. So in it, to make it even fair, the punishment that was meted out was your
That's
second will die. And
that's
then it was going to be at the hands of her grandmother. And
mhm.
so then Manon, you go. This is your second.
Manon said, I'll do it. Like, I'll do it. I'll kill Astrid. I'm gonna spare her the torture that the grandmother would probably inflict on her, and I will do it.
Yes.
Like,
A merciful kill.
a merciful kill. So there were some lines. Just give me a second, I'll get them up. Oh, and just the description. The Crocan's red cape fluttering behind her in the wind. Manon dared a look at her grandmother. Only hatred glowed in those ancient eyes. A hatred and a flicker of satisfaction that Astrid would be ended after decades of being deemed an unfit second. But at least this death was now hers to give, and in the east, slipping over the mountains like molten gold, the sun began to rise. 100 years she'd had with Astrid. She'd always thought she'd have 100 more. I lost it at that line. Lost. I was like, no, because I thought this was it. I really did. Manon said softly to Sorel, turn her around. My second shall see the dawn one last time. And yet Astrid knelt, shoulders square and head high, as she looked not at the dawn, but at Manon herself, while she stalked around her second to take a place a few feet before the matrons. Like the bravery, the courage, I will look you in the eye as you kill me because I know who you are and I know that you're actually good. And like, I cried so many freaking tears. It was a snotty cry fest. All it would take, so she lifted her sword, all it would take was one word from Astrid and she could save her own hide, because Astrid could have spilled the beans, right? And probably she had some secrets that she could have actually declared to the grandmother and maybe became free, but she remained silent. Like, what loyalty, right?
His loyalty to 13 till death.
Yeah.
Forever.
And then Astrid whispers, like, where to bury her body. Again, just like, I can't. This is just too much.
That's with her human. With her, what does she call her? With her hunter? With her.
Yeah.
Is that what she called her? Yeah. Yes. And had the stillborn with.
Yes. Manon looked to the 13 standing around Astrid in a half circle. One by one, they lifted 2 fingers to their brows. A murmur went through the crowd, the gesture not to honour a high witch, but a witch queen. And then we know that she raises her sword and she gives her final order to the 13, which is to run. And then she whirls around and brings Windcleaver down upon her grandmother. It's 3 pages, and yet I just felt like I'd run a marathon and my heart was just like in my throat. It's like, what? No, she's not dying. What? Yeah. So that was brilliantly written. So good.
Yes.
But
also it was like so nuanced because it showed, I feel like Astrid was the witch that was bringing change. Like she was really fighting hard. She's like, I've experienced love now. Like I've experienced this, and the way that we're raised, the everything we're taught in these clans, it just doesn't feel right after experiencing this like gentle love that she had, and then the way that her stillborn was handled, and she's like, I just think we can be better than this. I don't think she ever says those words, but she's always like a little bit detached. Like she's got this wild joy about living because she's kind of like, I'm not attached to what we're fighting for. Like I'm just going to live in the moment and nothing really matters in a way. Like, so it's kind of like this really sad joy, if that's, that contradiction of like, it's not real joy in a way, but it is this like joyous detachment from it, like an exhilaration of flying or, in the moment kind of thing. And so I feel like that's like Astrid kind of is the wedge that starts to like cause the cracks in a way. Like obviously it's inside Manon, so because we find out later her heritage, but she's the one I think that starts to bring the light into the cracks.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great way of saying it. Absolutely. Oh, all right. What's your next post? Look at you. She's tearing up. I'm tearing up. Like, oh, it's just, this is why this series is so beloved and it's really hard to top it, because we just, by this book, we are so in love with these characters, faults, flaws and all, warts and all. Yeah. I love that scene. that really had, my heart in my throat. And that beautiful twist, I was like, yes, go. Kill that fucking grandmother.
Yes.
Get rid
We
of her.
know that Manon is good. Like, they've written her, like, even though she's trying to do the right thing and she listens to her grandmother and she's now the wing lead and she's the heir to her grandma, she's not like them, that she's different. So I feel like that scene was really like the actual like catalyst of that sort of like old shell breaking of like, oh, actually, this is not going to work for me any longer.
Like almost cheering for that. We're like, we know who you are. We know what you're about. Like, come on. And it's that moment when she like says run and she turns on her grandmother, she embraces that there needs to be a better way.
Yeah.
This new generation needs to come in and change things. Just great. So that's where we're going to leave this episode. This is part 1. We hope that you will come back and join us for part 2. As you can tell, Magella and I have a lot to say about this book, and so we didn't want to rattle on and have really, really long episodes. So in the meantime, whilst you're waiting for the next part to be released, please go pick up that book and dive into some of those scenes we've talked about and relive them like we did as we were doing this deep dive review. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week. Thank you so much for listening. We hope that you felt like you were eavesdropping on a conversation that you have been dying to have with someone to discuss all the tiny details and possible plot twists of the books that you've recently read. Perhaps you don't have someone to chat to after you finish one of those epic books, so please give the show a follow and we would be honoured to be your book-obsessed friends. But mostly though, we hope it was fun, it gave you a giggle, it made you gasp or encouraged you to pick up a different author. Please share it with someone who you think would also love it, and drop us a review, letting us know what you loved and what you want to hear from us in the future. We will be back with another episode soon. Happy reading.